Hi, let's discuss buyer-broker agreements as a type of contract. Buyer-broker agreement. A buyer-broker agreement is between a broker and a buyer wishing to secure the purchase of a property. The contract specifies the obligations of both parties. Similar to a seller listing agreement, this is a type of employment contract. This agreement outlines the obligations of the broker to the buyer and the buyer to the broker, which means that it details the buyer-broker relationship and the responsibilities between broker and buyer. According to most buyer agency agreements, the buyer's agent's obligations include protecting their client's financial information, negotiating the best possible price for the buyer, the fact that the agent must disclose to the buyer if they're working with another buyer interested in the same property or the same types of property, showing all properties the buyer is interested in that fits their criteria and budget, and connecting the buyer with service providers such as inspectors, lenders, and home warranty companies. Buyers also have obligations under the buyer-broker agreement. The buyer must work with his or her buyer's agent exclusively. The buyer should not contact other agents to see properties, even if the buyer thinks he or she is saving the agent some time and effort. Buyers should share with the agent clearly defined must-haves and deal breakers about the home to be purchased to help the agent streamline the showing process. According to most buyer agency agreements, the buyer's obligations include working with the buyer's agent exclusively, not contacting other agents, sharing clearly defined details about desired property to help streamline the showing process. Buyer brokers may receive a retainer from the buyer at the outset of the agreement, or the buyer broker may work with the expectation of being paid from the selling broker upon the conclusion of transfer of property. Generally, the percentage of commission expected is detailed in the agreement. Should an amount less than agreed upon be paid by the listing broker to the buyer broker, then the buyer would be obligated for the difference. The buyer broker agreement is a contract between the buyer and the broker. As such, it should detail parties to the agreement, length of the agreement, types and details of property desired, the broker obligations, the buyer obligations, and compensation. Buyer brokerage agreement calculations. Following is an example of a buyer broker commission calculation. Story problem. A buyer entered into an agreement with the buyer broker, ensuring that the broker will earn 3% upon the successful purchase of a home by the buyer. How much would the buyer broker receive as payment should the buyer purchase a $200,000 property? Solution. Calculate the total commission based on the buyer broker contract. 200,000 is the purchase price times 0.03, which is 3%. That would equal $6,000 total commission due. Buyer broker agreement calculations, story problem 2. A buyer entered into an agreement with the buyer broker, ensuring that the broker will earn 3% upon the successful purchase of a home by the buyer. The selling broker offered a commission to the buyer broker that was just $5,000, and the purchase price for the home was $200,000. How much would the buyer owe the buyer broker? Solution. First, you do need to calculate the total commission that is due based on the purchase price. And in this case, again, we're using the $200,000 as the purchase price, with 3% being the total commission due, which is the $6,000. And then from the $6,000, subtract how much is being paid through the listing broker. In this story problem, we were told that the listing broker was going to pay the buyer broker $5,000. So you can subtract that from the total commission due. $6,000 minus $5,000 leaves $1,000 that the buyer's agent is still due and would need to be paid by the buyer based on the buyer broker agreement. Even as new agents, just about every licensee I know couldn't imagine agreeing to work with the seller without a written listing agreement. It would be legal to do so, I know, but you wouldn't really do it, and your broker certainly wouldn't let you work with the seller without a formal written listing agreement. Because in the end, you could probably end up putting out countless of hours and countless amounts of money into trying to get that house sold, only to end up not getting paid in the end. But at the same time, just about every new licensee that I know is perfectly willing to work with a buyer without securing a written buyer broker agreement. And just about every licensee, as a result, will end up putting countless hours and even money into trying to find a buyer or house just to end up not getting paid. You may think that the buyer is loyal to you, but without the agreement, anything can happen. For example, when I was a new agent being trained in real estate back in Indiana, my broker told me about a deal that he had recently lost. The buyers were his own grandparents. Because they were his grandparents, he never sat them down and hammered out exactly how the buying process works and how he was to get paid. He never presented a buyer broker agreement. He did, however, spend countless of hours with his grandparents trying to find them the perfect home. And then one Sunday, while they were out on their own, they happened to come across an open house sign. On impulse, they looked at that house and they fell in love. The agent working the open house told his grandparents that if they did not immediately put in an offer on the house, using the listing agent to write up the contract, that they would risk losing the home. So they did. They did just that. They bought a house without him, their grandson, as their buyer's agent. Oh, he was furious, but not at them. He was mad at himself. He hadn't coached them that if they walked into an open house, they should tell the agent that they were working with the buyer's agent. They did tell the agent that their grandson was a broker, but the agent out-talked them and pressured them to sign the deal without taking time to call him first. But if he had presented the buyer broker contract, he would have had an opportunity to better coach them. And he was a bit furious at the other agent. He felt that the other agent had taken advantage of his grandparents, who didn't even have the opportunity to negotiate the details into their agreement that he would have for them had he been writing up the offer. Did that agent take advantage? Perhaps. It is hard to really know without all the details, but the bottom line is even your closest family members will buy a house without you. In my opinion, you should always work with the buyer by securing the buyer broker agreement. Look to your broker for guidance on this topic.